Welcome to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have University of Arizona defensive coordinator and legendary defensive coach Don Brown with us. Coach, how are you doing?
Doing great, doing great. A beautiful day here in Tucson, and always love talking ball. Glad to
Well,
be with you.
at least one of us has got good weather. I'm stuck in the state of Ohio where it's been snowing nonstop for about 24 hours. So,
Can't say I haven't been there in the weather.
well, I mean,
My first time actually eating outside in January. So,
I was about to say, I mean, you've spent your essentially entire career in the Midwest or Northeast of this country. How has that adjustment been for you moving all the way out Southwest, far from pretty much anywhere you've ever been before?
um, Jed Fish and I worked my first year at Michigan. We worked together. And so this was kind of an easy transition for me in terms of, heading, we've got a bunch of good coaches that are anxious to get Arizona back on the right track and working hard every day to do so.
And I want to talk to you about y'all's staff real quick because I looked over it after we started talking, and most of that defensive staff I will say you've never worked with, but you've recently have not. I know you brought one coach with you from Michigan. What was that like was that important to try to bring at least one guy with you that was familiar with your system, or is that not, how do I want to word this? Was that not important for you? Does that not matter?
Well, obviously, Jed, we're across the country and recruiting in the West and the Southwest. So it was important that we got guys that were familiar with, the Western style of recruiting. So that was point one. Jed also felt it was important that we get guys that have played in the past at Arizona. So, for example, you got Randy Hundley, who's he's a legend. He's a leading tackler in the history of the school with 577 tackles. Chuck Cecil is our safeties coach. And again, he was here and it's kind of a link to the last few years as he was an analyst here with the previous coaching staff, and he's fit right in, done a nice job. Dwayne Walker is coaching our corners, and he's got a sorted, college background, pro background, but also was recruited on the West Coast. So, he just felt like having people that were associated with Arizona, and obviously getting guys in here that have recruited in the West. I did bring Keith Budzinski with me, who was an analyst with us last year, but has been with me over 13 years at different stops as a defensive assistant and coordinator for me. So obviously, he's the link. He's the link. So when guys want to get some questions answered and I'm not available, certainly he can help them in the right, help them in the right direction. And I brought Aaron Van Horn, who was my young intern, to also help us, with the computers and all those things that need to be done. So we're up and running at a pretty good pace, and we got a lot of great people, and everybody brings a little bit of something different to the table.
Now, you mentioned bringing something different. I mean, most of your staff has NFL experience, either playing or coaching in the NFL. How much does that knowledge, bringing that knowledge in, affect your system? I mean, you've had a system that's morphed to a point over the past 30 years, but how much does it still morph, and how much are they bringing new ideas to what you do?
Well, we're certainly bringing new ideas and discussing things, but at the same point, the multiplicity, the ability to get after the quarterback, and the ability to stop the run. Those are philosophical issues that we all feel very strongly about, and obviously how we go about dealing with it is, they've certainly brought their ideas to the table, and we're kind of sorting our way through it, and to be quite honest, enjoying the process.
Good. Now, how rejuvenating is that for you? For when you get to a new place and you get to reinstall your defense all over again? Because I mean, to a certain point, when you've been a place long enough, I mean, I'm not saying you're not reinstalling it, but good portion of the kids probably know a good portion of what you're doing. So how rejuvenating is that for you as a
No,
coach?
I think your point's really valid. Well, I'll tell you, I think your point's really valid. Um, it's funny, we were talking as a defensive staff as we're getting ready here to, to install the defense. I didn't realize how excited I was in that part of it, because what happens is when you go through year one, year two, and year three, and obviously you're changing and you're adjusting virtually every year, and trying to make the tweaks that you feel are necessary for success. But at the same standpoint, the system is the system, and there's some things that are tried and true, and so it's not as challenging as starting from scratch. So starting from scratch and getting all the guys on the same page and all the players, is kind of a fun process, and one that I'm looking forward to. I haven't done it for 5 years, so kind of excited to get this thing rolling. One of our meetings tomorrow, is a philosophical meeting, and some people look at that like, oh, I'm really looking forward to presenting it to the players and show them the things that we really feel are important as a defensive staff.
Well, I kind of want to get on some of your philosophical things because I think you're probably, I don't want to say most well known. That's probably a bad term, but I mean, you have several nicknames like Dr. Blitz. I think one of your most famous clips that you can probably find anywhere on the internet is you talking about solving problems with aggression. I think you're well known for that, and that's a good moniker to have. I mean, let's be honest, your defenses are successful everywhere you go. That's no one questions that. Your pass defense is usually very good. Your run defense is usually very good. And again, you solve them with problems with aggression. But I'm curious, where did that philosophy come from over the course of your 30 plus year career in terms of why choose that style of defense?
I'm going to give you when it happened. In 1998, I worked for Mark Whipple, and we had taken over the UMass program that was coming off a 2-9 season, and we had gotten through about half the season, and we were 4-2. So obviously, things were going pretty well. But Whip said, "Hey, Don, when we're aggressive and we get after people, it just seems like our players light up." And he said, "Why don't we just go that way?" And to be honest, that was the start. And we ended up losing one game the rest of the way and won a national championship. So we actually took a team that was 2-9, turned it into 12-3, and beat Georgia Southern in the national championship. And that's when it all started. And, at that time, we were playing a lot of what we called Falcon, people call zero coverage. And, obviously there were a lot of man elements there, but at the same time, there was some zone elements. But we evolved from a 4-down to a 3-down structure, and we were rotating between the two structures. But there was always the threat of blitz or simulating blitz. So, that's when it all started, was back in 1998. And to be honest, I've stayed true to form since then.
Now, you mentioned simulated pressure there, and because as I was prepping for this interview, I kind of listened to some other stuff you talked about, and watched some of your other games. I mean, obviously you're known for that, but I think one of the things that gets ignored is probably a bad word, but is how much simulated pressure you do. and because you want to, because how, in my opinion, from watching you, how much variety of looks you want to give opposing offenses. How, I mean, when did that come in for you, and kind of why did you bring that into your aggressive defense?
Sure. Um, Obviously, when you associate with pressure, you're associating at least five players attacking the quarterback, or even six, or in some read scenarios, seven. But well, it all depends on who you bring offense with. If you get into 7 and 8 man up boxes and you overload to one side, now you have the ability to create the overload to, for example, the left, and really come with a second level player or a third level player to the right, but it still is a 4-man rush. So, your coverages can be, virtually anything to be able to utilize as you prepare for that opponent, what you think will be the best answers, to create difficulty for the offense preparing for. So blitz simulators in our world work because they know we're coming. There's no doubt that we're going to come. There's no doubt that Arizona is going to blitz you. But the reality is we can also show that look and rush for and try to create that same, try to hurry that quarterback up by creating the overload.
That makes 100% sense, Coach. And I kind of want to build off of that because you've mentioned kind of some of the, because I was listening to an interview with you the other day, and you mentioned about some of the changes and all different offenses you were seeing in this league compared to the Big Ten. How much does that alter? Is that going to alter how you blitz? And it's not going to stop you from adding pressure, but how much is that going to alter how you bring pressure in terms of where from and what fronts and so forth?
Well, the one thing that, that I'm seeing is a lot more, what I call double sets or the tight end being removed from the core. And I'm not saying those aren't prevalent or don't show up in the Big Ten, because they do, but in just, my short, it seems much more of a common piece here in the Pac-12. The one thing I noticed as well is 11 personnel, which is 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, and 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, 2 receivers in the back. Those are really, if you said to me, what are the prevalent formations in the Pac-12, those would be the 2 that I would say are first, second, and then 10 personnel doubles where you have, balance 2 by 2, obviously all receivers away from the core. And, so that's going to become much more of an area that we have to adjust our coverages to handle the various route progressions. But also, when you remove that 6th guy, that tight end, he's removed away from the box. There's some options there that I'm kind of excited about that are more prevalent. The 10 personnel without the tight end being part of the box. So I'm looking forward to kind of attacking those protections as well.
Now, speaking of attacking protections, obviously you have a whole staff that looks at the opposing offense and scouting. I mean, your entire defensive staff, the GAs, the quality control guys. But what particularly do you look at when you're breaking down an offense?
I'm a big believer that I handle all the run game, the box runs, the perimeter runs. I literally draw. I don't know, 150 to 175 cards a week, and against all the looks. And I do that for one reason. We're very, diversified in how we're going to go about attacking people. So we've got the bases that they're going to be against, and then obviously we got all the run pressures that we have, and then third down pass, and then I ask them not to make sense. So it's easier for me to do it because I can put our guys Saturday afternoons or Saturday evening. So I put that on myself.
First thing, I got a question about analytics and what I heard you talk about is the Havoc rate. How much do you look at analytics? And then do you still, I'm listening to a conversation where you were talking about a Havoc rate and pressure you're putting on people. How much does that still factor into what you do?
Big time. Probably more involved in the pieces of Havoc rate. See, here's my feeling, okay? TFLs, sacks, and quarterback pressures or quarterback knockdowns, not necessarily sacks, but just getting them on the release, and those things are really important because all of those things go to getting the quarterback off schedule. Okay, TFLs not only in the run game as well, but in the pass game. Well, if you're going to get TFLs in the run game, you got to be able to that match the spread runs that we see on a week-to-week basis. So, that whole series of run pressures is critical to getting people in third and long scenarios. Okay. Then you go to the third and long scenarios, and obviously you've got your coverage family. You've got your blitz simulators, which are really, like we've talked about, show blitz, don't necessarily are blitzes, and then you're actually coming. So you're trying to create all these things that the quarterback, the offensive coordinator, when they look over to the side, all these things, you're trying to make them evaluate, well, what is actually happening on this particular play. And I just think the more diverse that you are, the better your chances are for success. So, for example, we have what we call a speed front in our 4 down, but that we bring in on 3rd down. Well, we're not necessarily blitzing. We're just bringing in the 4 best rushes we got. We're running assorted twists and movements to try to attack the offensive lines, what we perceive are their, weaknesses or a lack of strength in one particular area or another. And then again, you're attacking the protections. Now, the protections and being man coverage all the time. So you've got to have assorted coverages that complement and look very similar to those scenarios that you're trying to present. And, you're just trying to create as much headaches for the quarterback and the offensive coordinator as you possibly can. So, there's a lot of today when you come in on Sunday, that's really one of the first things I'm going to look at, making this quarterback unsettled in the throw game. I tell the guys all the time, when you get in on the pressure and you're scot-free and sack the quarterback, when you come, so, that's kind of what I tell them as a joke. But the bottom line is that's what you're shooting for, is to try to somehow, some way get a free run against the protection.
How much self-scouting do you do as the season goes along with in terms of your pressures and your coverages and how they're getting attacked and how successful your attacks are?
Yeah, that's a big piece. here's the thing that you don't want. You don't want to be running, you're going, we're not getting what we want out of that. Well, then what in the hell are you running it for? Move away from it. The killer is there's always 2 or 3 things that you're doing really, really well. And you're sitting there at the end of it going, geez, I gotta run that thing. I just gotta keep running that thing more. And that's the killer. Is sometimes we give the coordinators and the offense too much credit. And but the one thing I'll tell you that I'm not afraid of is when we have success with the 3rd down pressure, for example, I'm not afraid to come back and run it again, because you'll be surprised how many times that you'll do that and you'll have the same form of success. So you can't be afraid, well, I ran it, they're going to go to the sideline and make an adjustment. Well, they might, but they may not. And the only way you're going to find out is if you run it again. So I think it's the key is self, and evaluate the things that you do well and the things that you're not doing well. And you're either going to have to tweak those things or move on and do the things that you're good at. For example, in 2018, when I was at Michigan, we were a really good 4 down front, and we pressured well out of 4 down fronts. But in 2019, we weren't as blessed with the interior defensive linemen, but we had a kid by the name of Josh Uche, who was an outstanding pass rusher, versatile, could use him as an end, use him as a backer, and we did a lot of 3 down rush. So those things, those self-scouting things are so critical to, kind of just paint the picture of, yes, things are happening the way we want them to happen, or no, certain things that are not successful. And sometimes, just worrying about what you're doing is more important than worrying about what the offense is doing. Because I'll be honest, you see a lot of 11, some quarterbacks may be better runners than others. Some may be better throwers than others. But those are the adjustments that you're going to make on a week-to-week basis to try to, control your next opponent.
Okay, and then kind of continue with the self-scouting pieces. What does your off season look like? Obviously, you have recruiting all off season. That's kind of the given. But in terms of the actual X's and O's, what is your from ideally January 10th when you're either playing in a national title game or winning a national title game to August when you start your camps? What does that off season look like for you in terms of your system and evaluating and what you're going to install next year, keep, scrap, add? What does that look like?
Well, obviously the thing that's difficult now is with this pandemic, there's no off-campus recruiting. So what we've been able to do, and I think Coach Fish has organized us really good here, we've been taking the mornings and coming in and doing OD meetings. So the offensive staff's meeting, the defensive staff meeting, and those are pretty much geared to concept, offense, defense, what we're doing, the review of what we did in our situation on the same page, and pushing that, we're all pushing the same rock in the same direction. So we're trying to get everybody on the same page in terms of concept, scheme, personnel development, and all those things. Now, usually we're on the road during this period of time. So this has been an added piece for us, but it's been really good because, as you alluded to when we started, we're a whole new staff. And I've only had one guy that has familiarity with what we're doing. So we've needed the time to get on the same page. In the afternoon, that's, we all divide and conquer and attack the recruiting by position with as many different position groups as I can. And so that's been kind of the way we've, obviously there's other things involved, but for the most part, we've been trying to go scheme in the morning and recruiting in the afternoon.
But I mean, kind of build off that. How much time do you spend starting to scout the schools you're going to play next year? In terms of, like, I'm not necessarily saying scouts that word, but starting to evaluate, okay, this is what talent they got, this is what schemes they typically run, and then how in depth does that get?
Well, usually when you're not in an adjustment where a brand new staff trying to get on the same page, you spend a considerable amount of your X and O time on key opponents, and you're really looking at the opponents that had a player two that hurt you. You want to make sure that you've addressed it, or a couple of pass routes that you need to address, which could involve, there's much more of that going on when you're not a new staff and you're trying to just get to know each other and understand the things that we're going to teach the players come up.
I've heard you, like I said, I prepped for this, so I heard you mention that you really don't, and this might be misquoting you slightly, is you don't really care what they can't do. You want to know what they can do. And
100%.
And how much is that? I'm probably gonna word this really badly, but oh well. How much does that factor into you week to week? Or actually, let me rephrase this. How much does that factor into how many different personnel combinations you have to play into the strengths of your kids?
I think that piece right there is so critical to success. When you don't, for example, when you take a linebacker, for example, and that guy can rush the passer. Like I had a kid, Josh Uche, who I happened to recruit when he was a youngster at Miami Columbus. The thing he did well, he was an undersized guy. He put his hand on the ground, on mark it, set, go, and he would rush the passer. So what we allowed him to do when he came to Michigan with me is we would put him in as many scenarios where he could rush the passer. We even got to the point with him where, for example, we would identify the offensive lineman that we were going to attack that week, and we would make sure he's over him. And now, I'm not saying it wasn't an accomplished linebacker, but his greatest strength was his ability to dominate passing downs with his ability to rush the passer. He was the number one rusher in Havoc rate in 2019 attacking. I didn't say sack leader. I said number one rusher in knocking the quarterback down, tipping the ball, making him throw it away. Put it all together. That was his baby. And, he's a third-round pick of the Patriots, and they do a lot of those things with him and Chase Winovich, who also played for me in that scenario. Okay? We had Jabril Peppers, who finished third and fifth in the Heisman. And he was one of our first Vipers, but he was an excellent interior blitzer. And he was not shy about getting in the box and playing the run game at 207 pounds. And I know that sounds weird, but some guys, they just can do certain things. He was a great run through defender. And when it got into the red zone, he would show up not only in the pass game with the blitz game, but he was a tremendous run through defender as a linebacker in the box. So, you know, there's so many differences. And if me, the last couple of years is the best spread run defender on the edge I've ever seen. So what are we going to do? We're going to put him in there against the good spread run teams. He's going to play the open side end, and he's going to dominate in the spread run game. That conflicts in it, trying to create conflict. He had it all and doing his job and being right. I mean, I can't think of anybody I've coached over the years that's been the point. And you really got into a good, sometimes, well, then don't put him in and have him do it. Let him do other things. Put him brush the edge. Oh, he's a good bludgeon blitzer in the inside. He knows how to use his hands, and he can play the run in there, but he can also rush the passer against offensive linemen. Well, let him do it, and just make sure that you do that. And I'm a big believer. Let guys do what they do. Let guys do things that they can gain confidence in doing, and then they'll get better at the other phases as long as you're, giving them a chance to feel good about themselves. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's been my deal for a long time. Just if a guy's got one trait that he's really super at, let him do it. Nickel defenders, safeties that can, play scooch technique over the slot. Let them do it. It goes to all positions, and I just think there's a lot of guys, especially in this day and age, with the specialization of first and second down as opposed to third down, as opposed to the screen game, put them in things that they're really good at.
I mean, I agree 100%. I couldn't agree more, Coach. It's like obviously you want to try to improve kids' skills at what they're bad at, but at the same time, I want to know what they're good at and be able to maximize that skill. Like, we had a mobile quarterback this year, so that we relied on those skills at certain times.
Let them run.
Yeah, that's, you just like figure out what your kids are good at and adjust to that. Just and going from there. I agree 100%. I think from a observation thing, that's probably why you had so many kids drafted from the University of Michigan to the New England Patriots, because it's a similar philosophy, and you did a good job at developing them, and they kind of just fit into what they wanted to do. And then, like, the last two questions I have for you are, whose brain do you pick? Obviously you've been doing this for 30 plus years at a very highly successful level. Everywhere you've been successful. But when you have questions or you're looking to add stuff, who do you go to, or who do you try to reach out to?
I have a very good friend that is always there for me when I want to ask a question about a particular tweak or answer, and that's Bob Sutton, who was the defensive coordinator for Kansas City Chiefs for Andy Reid. Was a head coach at Army. He was with Dan Quinn in the staff down with the Atlanta Falcons, and that's the guy that I go to. And he is absolutely one of the brightest football minds in the game of football.
And then the last question I got for you, Coach, as we wrap this up, and again, I appreciate your time, is you've done that. You've been a head coach, you've been a defense coordinator, and mine, I might say a pretty successful head coach as well, 95-45, because I double checked your record today, which is pretty impressive. Um, and but at this, why do you still coach? I'm just curious, like, what drives you to get up every morning and do this?
People, I love trying to maximize guys' potential. I think I got a lot to offer in terms of helping them with their fundamentals so that they have enough tools in their toolbox. I also think I have a disciplined approach, but at the same time, I still have fun with this game and I have fun with young people. So as long as that part of it, people say to me, well, you were a head coach for a long time, you're most successful at UMass and all this. I just love coaching defense. I love the challenge of it. And guess what? It's hard coaching defense every week and being perfect. It really is. I'll have a tough week and, all of a sudden, they're not good at their craft. I mean, it's tough coaching defense in the college football ranks and even in the pro football ranks, but especially in college and the new spread runs that are out there every week. And, I'll be honest, they don't let us touch those guys much anymore. We're kind of going towards the NFL in terms of coverage stuff. So that's a little bit of a concern. But at the same time, teaching guys, I'm a no free access guy. I don't say that without pride. I like my players that are in the back end to have the ability to go to the NFL. So, that's an area that I think, we do a very good job of getting those guys ready for that task. And up front, utilizing them to rush the passer and building, again, their toolbox, the long arm stab, throwing the outside arm, the club wipe, the speed to power, all those things. The fun thing, I still get excited about coaching speed to power. It's not just worrying about the counter and all the scheme stuff. I love teaching the fundamentals.
Well, I mean, that's fantastic, Coach. Like, and I think any of us that's ever talked to you or watched you talk, I think we can kind of still see that passion. Because I remember, I think it was like a month ago when you got announced at the press conference, you had to calm yourself down, I think, at one point, because you were getting too excited. So, like I said, I appreciate it, Coach. I appreciate you coming on and just let me pick your brain for a little bit on some things, on kind of some of the stuff you look at and what you do and how you do it, and at least off the field and just overall purpose. Like I said, I just want to say I appreciate it, Coach.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it. You had your questions ready. You were ready to go. So you should feel good about that. You were good.
Thank you, Coach. That was Coach Don Brown. Coach, again, is now the defensive coordinator at the University of Arizona. Below will be all the tags to kind of see various spots of this interview over again. I want to thank Coach again, and that was another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.